All right, welcome back. So let's talk about something fundamental. When an economist tells you they can explain something, what does that really mean? What's the difference between a genuinely scientific explanation and, well, just a good story?
Okay, let's start with a classic puzzle, one you've probably thought about. You buy a shiny new car, drive it right off the lot, and boom. In that one instant, it's worth thousands of dollars less. Why? Is it really just the new car smell wearing off? Of course not. There's something much deeper going on here. And economists like George Akerlof knew that figuring out the real reason, well, that's the whole ballgame.
And that right there gets us to the heart of it. Economists are always offering up explanations for everything, right? From why your car loses value to why a whole economy might crash. But what makes one of those explanations a good one? What are the rules of the game here? How do we know they're not just making stuff up?
You know, the social theorist John Elster said it best. The whole point of social science is to explain things. It's not a side quest, it's the main mission. Yeah, predicting the future is cool, but understanding why stuff happens, that's the real goal. So again, what makes an explanation actually count?
Well, for a long time, a lot of very smart people, scientists, philosophers, thought they had the answer, a kind of perfect recipe, a universal blueprint for explaining anything scientifically. It's got a fancy name, the Deductive-Nomological model. Let's just call it the DN model to keep things simple.
Okay, before we dive into how it works, we just need two quick, kind of nerdy terms. The thing you're trying to explain, that's the explanandum. And the theory or law that does the explaining, that's the explanans. Got it? Cool. Now let's see this so-called perfect blueprint in action.
The DN model is actually beautiful in its simplicity. It works just like a math proof. It's that clean. Step 1, you start with a universal, unbreakable scientific law. Step 2, you add a specific fact about the situation, an initial condition. And then step 3, the thing you're trying to explain, the outcome, just has to follow. It's logical, it's certain, no questions asked.
So let's take a super simple physics example. Why does this piece of chalk fall when I let go? Well, law, all objects with mass near Earth fall. Condition, this piece of chalk has mass. Conclusion, therefore the chalk falls. See? It's perfect. Clean, logical, undeniable. So, here's the big question. Why can't we just use this perfect blueprint for economics?
And this is where the problems start. Because when you try to take that perfect, clean blueprint and apply it to the messy, unpredictable world of human beings and their economies, it doesn't just crack, it completely shatters.
So, here's crack number 1. Remember how the whole thing needs a universal law to even get off the ground? Well, what if there just aren't any universal, capital L laws when it comes to human behavior? What if we're all just a bit too, well, human for that kind of simplicity? I mean, take a bedrock economic idea. People prefer more of a good thing to less of it. Sounds reasonable, right? But is it a law like gravity? No way! We can all think of a million exceptions. What about people who choose more free time over a bigger paycheck? Or people who donate tons of money to charity? These aren't laws. They're at best useful rules of thumb, and that's just not good enough for the DM model.
And that leads us to crack number 2, which goes even deeper. The problem is that what economists call laws just aren't the same kind of thing as laws in physics.
Just look at this comparison. On one side, you've got the law of gravity. Works everywhere, all the time, no exceptions. On the other side, you have something like the so-called iron law of wages. Is it a strict rule? Nope. It's a tendency, and it only works, maybe, in the long run, and only if a whole bunch of other things don't get in the way. That's not a law, that's a wish. It's an observation with a million footnotes.
Now, economists have a clever way to deal with this. They use a little Latin phrase, ceteris paribus. It just means all other things being equal. It's basically them saying, okay, our law works perfectly, as long as literally nothing else in the world changes. But you see the problem, right? In the real world, things are never equal. They're always changing. Okay, so here's the third and final crack, and this one might be the biggest of all. Let's just pretend for a second. Imagine we actually did find a perfect, unbreakable economic law. Would just stating that law really explain anything in a satisfying way?
Let's look at something called Okun's law. It's a pretty reliable observation that for every 1% increase in unemployment, the country's GDP tends to fall by about 2%.
Okay, that's a pattern. But does saying Okun's law explain why that happens? No. The law just describes the puzzle. It doesn't solve it. The real explanation is figuring out why that connection exists in the first place.
So, if that old, perfect blueprint is basically useless for economics, what do we do? Well, it turns out modern economists have a whole different toolbox, one that's a lot more flexible and, honestly, a lot more useful for explaining how the messy real world actually works.
See, the goal isn't just to find a rule that says when A happens, B follows. The real goal now is to open up the black box. We don't just want to know that A causes B. A good explanation needs to show us how. It needs to reveal all the little gears and levers inside that box that connect the two.
And inside this new toolbox, you've got a few key things. You have rational choice explanations, which are all about understanding why individual people make the choices they do. You have causal tendencies, recognizing forces that push things in a certain direction, even if they don't always win out. But the real star of the show is what's called a mechanistic explanation. This is where you trace the step-by-step causal chain. So let's go back to that used car. A good explanation isn't just a law of depreciation. No, it's a mechanism. The seller knows if the car is a lemon, but the buyer doesn't. The buyer is scared of getting ripped off, so they're only willing to pay a lower price. This fear lowers the price for all used cars, even the good ones. That is opening the black box.
Okay, I know this all might sound a little abstract, little ivory tower, but trust me, how we decide what counts as a good explanation has huge real-world consequences.
Think about it. If you don't actually understand the mechanism, the how and why, then any policy you create is just a shot in the dark. It's like knowing your car is broken but having no idea what's wrong under the hood. You can't fix it. Good, effective policies come from truly understanding the process, from opening that black box, not just from noticing two things happen at the same time and calling it a law.
So, that leaves us with a really important question to think about. If economics isn't a science of strict universal laws, but a science of tendencies and mechanisms, what does that mean for all the policies and predictions that are based on it? It probably means we need a little more humility and a whole lot more curiosity about what's actually going on inside that black box. Something to chew on. Thanks for joining me.